Hello everyone and welcome to Radiant 101. This is an online platform to provide some support, some education and bring awareness to issues around our faith. So please stick around to the end of the video. We'll be looking into God's biblical calendar, which will be the basics and will give some background info. So for the most part in the West, we are using the Gregorian calendar based on 365 days of the year, broken down into 12 months from January to December, in which we have 30 or 31 days, with the exception of February, which has 28 days. Every 4 years or so, we have a leap year. Typically, celebrations begin the 31st of December to start the new year, in which we celebrate with family, with fireworks, food, drink, with dance, everything we need to make sure that we have a good time. But then, has this always been the case? Has this always been the status quo? So this brings us to take a look into the Bible, in which we find something rather interesting and quite peculiar, especially when we look towards the story of the Exodus in Exodus 12 verse 1. We're reminded that God told Moses and Aaron in Egypt that this is the beginning of the month of the year for us, the first and head of the year. Also, in Deuteronomy 16, we're told to observe the month of Abib. In Exodus 34, we're also reminded of the month of Abib. So someone may want to ask, what is so significant about the month of Abib? And when does it actually begin, since it's the head of and the first of the year? When we look towards our calendar, we found out that Abib occurs typically between March/April, towards the springtime. So here we see that the beginning of the year marking with Abib, which is Aviv in Hebrew, marks the start of the year. So then what is Aviv and what makes it so significant? So the word Aviv is an agricultural term in ancient Hebrew, relating to the stage of ripening of barley. But we'll discuss a bit more on that later. But if we quickly turn back onto Exodus 12, if we actually look into the word month, which is Hodesh in Hebrew, we can literally translate this as new moon. So we basically have a lunar cycle of 12 new months or 12 new moons. So in Genesis, we're also supported with the saying that God created the sun and the moon for times and seasons and appointed times. Back to the issue of the Aviv, because this is quite a significant marker to start the head of the year, or to start the year. When we mention to observe the month of the Aviv, referring to the barley, we find out that the barley needs to be mature for it to be in the stage of the Aviv. Otherwise, a leap year of a month is added before the next year begins. But more information on this is outside our Bibles and might require a bit of in-depth look. But most important, because in Exodus 23, the month of the Aviv, or the barley actually, connects to the festival of unleavened bread, which occurs a few weeks from now. We find out also in the story of the Exodus that the flax was smitten and the barley was in air, which in Old English is the barley was Aviv. And that's when the Israelites came out of Egypt. We might not live in that agricultural society, but then there is something to note about the barley, because it normally ripens during the springtime, and when they become ripe, they become more brittle and lighting in color. And this corresponds to the time of the year, as well as the change in temperature as the earth revolves around the sun. So the barley basically has to be ripe enough for it to be used in the festival of unleavened bread, and the maturity of the barley has to coincide with the sighting of the new moon for us to start the year. So with this in mind, how do we then celebrate the New Year's in our own time now? Sure enough, we have the technology and things to help us to determine the start of the year. Primarily, we have the markers being the sighting of the new moon, as well as the maturity in the barley crops. But then how then do we spread the word of God's calendar and God's timing? Because if there's anything we should know about the Bible, It's that God does his things in his own time. For some, this might be important. For some, it might not be important. So seeing it's also the start of the new year, I guess we ought to take some kind of individual collective responsibility towards our own spiritual journeys. We might also want to have a bit more understanding to know that God does his own things in his own timing. Knowing the festivals gives us a much deeper understanding from Genesis to Revelation, as well as the festive periods that occurs in the book. It gives us some insight and some background and understanding of us understanding God's festivals and his appointed times, including the Sabbath as well. So, what do you think of this issue of the biblical New Year celebrated? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to you? I would like to know your thoughts on this topic. So please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and wishing you a happy new year for everyone.